Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversation, forums just like this one that occur every single week of the year, and we're so glad you're with us today. I'm Carrie Schmidt. I'm managing partner of Plentiful. I'm proud to serve on CMC's Board of Trustees, and I'm the CMC's Resource and Development Committee Chair. For those of you joining us via live stream, we're coming to you live from the Ellis in Columbus's historic Italian village, where we welcome everyone. We are so grateful for Audubon University and the Health Policy Institute of Ohio for sponsoring today's special forum. This platform. We are also grateful for our presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And thank you to the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a village, so let's thank everyone who came together to make today's forum possible. All right, well, here we are, November 6th. There is a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack and think about and think through, and I'm glad we're doing that together in community today. Today we will take stock of a shared experience, a trying time in our nation. We'll reflect on our common goal of preserving democracy and upholding justice. We will recommit to listening to one another in good faith and with open minds. And to help restart our national conversation and to introduce today's speakers, we welcome to the podium Dr. John Comerford, president of Audubon University, excuse me. Tricky. The podium is yours. And I'll raise this up.
Well, thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here and be partnered with the CMC on this. We had a thought on campus that the day after an election like this one, we were going to need to do something healing. We're going to need to do something to bring our campus and our community back together. And we had a contact with Reverend Tutu and thought we should call our friends at the Columbus Metropolitan Club because they'll want to do the same thing. And so the partnership that we have with the CMC and the great staff here mean a lot in making things like this happen. Elections are unpleasant anymore, right? They're divisive. Politicians have figured out that it's much easier to throw red meat at your base than it is to bring people together around the swing voter in the middle. And you don't run for anything anymore, you run against the other side. If you vote for the other side, it's the end of the world. If you vote for me, I'll save you. Becomes the pitch. And so at the end of election, I don't know about you, but I feel a little yucky, a little torn apart, little separated from my fellow American. And it's important to take that moment to come back together. And being a college president, I am constantly aware of our role in society being one of the few left where people from different backgrounds and different ideologies and different religions, that diversity comes together on a campus about learning, about respecting one another, about taking from one another something positive, not tearing apart. And we're one of the few places left in society that still do that on a college campus. Otherwise, we live in our little fiefdoms and we're separated. Well, the CMC does that too, right? This is a place where we come together around ideas and respect and inclusion. And so it made sense to do this here today. It's my great honor to introduce our feature for today, who is Reverend Naomi Tutu, who's the daughter of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and the priest associate with All Saints Episcopal in Atlanta, Georgia. And our host to facilitate the conversation is a Democratic institution unto herself, Colleen Marshall of NBC4. So thank you, Colleen, for being here with us. And to start us, please welcome Reverend Tutu for a few opening comments before we turn to the conversation. Reverend Tutu.
Thank you all for being here. I have a loud voice, so I'm always careful with mics because it seems like I'm screaming at people. I spend a lot of my time screaming at people, so that might be why. But it is truly an honor to be here with you today on a day that I have spent much of the morning consoling and encouraging friends, children, and parishioners. And I have used my own experience in apartheid South Africa as a starting point for them. And I have talked about the many times that I felt that this was it. This was the end. This was, apartheid was going to devour us all, destroy our country, and leave us with a civil war at the least, or I don't know what the worst would be. And at that time, I would be constantly reminded by people in my community that, no, it's not the end. And one of the things that I remember most vividly is that we have such an amazing assortment of proverbs in our African languages that teach us that, no, this is not the end. And thinking about it was this morning reminding my children of a proverb that I had said when I was growing up I would never use with my children because my parents used it ad infinitum with us, and I swore that my children would never hear this proverb from me. And the proverb is, in my mother tongue, Xhosa, it is umtu ngumtu ngabantu. A person is a person through other people. And my community would tell me to hold on to the truth of that proverb, to hold on to the truth of the basic meaning of the proverb, that we learn how to be human beings by watching those who surround us, that we learn the right way to eat, the right way to speak, the right way to greet, that all of those things we learn from other human beings in our lives. But even more importantly, that the proverb was taught that you cannot do something for or against another human being without, in a real sense, doing something for or against yourself. And that proverb in the context of South Africa seemed so ridiculous to me that I thought, you know, okay, it makes sense in a small community. When we look at small communities, when we look at our families, when we look at our church groups, when we look at our community, the people that we live with, the people that we work with, that yes, maybe that makes sense in those small, localized contexts where we know one another and we already care at some level for one another. But I thought in the big scheme of things, this proverb sounds like pie in the sky. And I came to recognize its truth when my eyes were open to when we say that you do something against yourself when you harm another, that you might not harm yourself in exactly the way that you have harmed the other, but there is an impact on you. And for me, that recognition of how apartheid also oppressed white South Africans, that they could not escape from the fear that their place of privilege placed in them, the fear of what they called the swart gevaar, the black onslaught, that fear was something that they continued to live with even as they continued to oppress us. And so for me, that realization that it is in fact true, that we cannot do something for ourselves. We cannot open a space of sharing, of caring, and healing for others without opening that space for ourselves. And likewise, we cannot teach and preach hate and division without making those parts of our lived experience. And so today, I want to encourage you that as you go about your business following this time, that you pay attention to how you interact with other human beings. Maybe that when you model care, listening, compassion, that gives others the space to do the same, even in this divided country that we are right now. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess afternoon now. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I have to start it this way because I thought of it when you were introduced as the daughter of the Reverend Desmond Tutu, that you do not walk through your life without that moniker of being the daughter of. You are also now Reverend Tutu. Mm-hmm. So talk to us just a little bit about the weight of that, the responsibility of that. Is it a burden? Is it a joy?
It's both. It is really both. And, I always share my origin story, which is that when I was born, my father was in seminary. And so he couldn't come home for my birth, but a friend of his came, a friend of the family came to get the report about this new baby to take back to him. And when she went back, she told him, oh, this one, all we need to do is put a cassock and glasses on, and she is you. So for me, my story was that from early, I said, I've got his face that I cannot do anything about. So I am definitely not going to take his job. So I was never going to be a priest. I knew that from, I think I was 6 or 7. I knew the one thing on this planet I would never be would be a priest. And I fought that forever. And so I wasn't ordained till I was in my late 50s. That's how stubborn I am. Right? And so there are so many ways that being my father's daughter has been a gift. The opportunity to meet amazing people during apartheid, to hear people dreaming and believing in a better South Africa, the opportunity to travel, the opportunity, it has opened doors for me. So I cannot say that it has been always a burden. It has given me some great gifts. I think that the burden has been the idea that, especially now that I'm a priest, that I'm going to be a mini Desmond Tutu. And there's no way, that man was in many ways close to being a saint. And yeah, no, thank you. No, that's not me.
You still have time.
So, yeah.
I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the election, the campaign season that we just came off of, and it did divide this country. I went on the campaign trail with both Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown. And what I was hearing from the people, their supporters, was one of two things. Either we are right and they are evil, or we are right and they are demented. It was never a feeling of diplomacy or let's go to the table and compromise, let's find a middle ground. So when you have that kind of division on not just in Ohio, but on a national level, you talk about unity and compassion. How do you think we go back to that?
So I'm not sure that I'm even talking about going back, because I don't know that there has been a time in the U.S. where unity and compassion has been the true currency. And so for me, the challenge is also an opportunity for us to really look at ourselves, what we are teaching our young people, look at what parts of our story we accept and which parts of our story we hide from. And I say that because I think that part of the ease of dividing people is when there is a question around what is our story, right? What is the story that has got us this far? And I think that the U.S. has been really good at concentrating on the parts of the story that make us feel good. And so then we are surprised when the parts of the story that are more problematic spring up again and again and again. And that I think is the reality that got us where we are today. And part of the reason I say that is from coming out of South Africa and the impact of having a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in our country following the end of apartheid. Because I think the greatest gift that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission gave South Africans was the truth of the different places and people and actions that had brought us to that point. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and the evil, and the pain-inducing, but that having heard those stories, that then we had to be, as a country, acknowledging that the bad is part of our story as well. And if we want to not repeat the bad, we have to acknowledge it, at least, and therefore be teaching the next generation about what has happened so that moving forward, they at least know what to look for. And I think that the U.S., the great disservice that we have done ourselves and those who come after us is this decision to only talk about the stories, the history that makes us proud.
Yeah, and that's true now even in the education system, is what we're hearing from some teachers who are pressured to not maybe, take the lens back and look at what really happened. And I've also heard from women, including a few here this morning, who see this as a rejection of women in leadership, and that they're taking that very personally. When this was political as well as economic, as well as social, but a lot of women are saying, when is it our turn? What do you say to women who are, in particular, feeling as if we will never get to the glass ceiling, let alone through it?
And my first is, I hear you, sister, because that feeling is for real, for real. So I don't think that it is, I don't think that this is hyperbole by women to say that, objectively, looking at the two candidates, we kept hearing that Vice President Harris had not given us any policies. And I always ask people, so give me the policies that the now president-elect has given us. And and that lack did not seem to bother people as much as the lack that they saw from Vice President Harris. And so I think that there is a continued reality that as women, we need to work twice as hard and be 50 times as bright and 100 times as assertive in order to reach even close to the same level. But I also say to women that, and this is part of the theme that I'm going to talk about this evening at Otterbein, is that this is not the end of the story, right? This is not the end of the story. This is probably not even the middle of the story. That, you know, we have struggled as women from once they started blaming us for eating the apple, really, we have struggled for the right to vote. We have struggled for the right to work in the same fields as men. We have struggled for access to education. We have struggled for bodily autonomy. And so this is not the end of the story. That I keep saying we cannot give up hope, because there were women who came before us whose struggle was much worse than ours, and they held on to that hope and continued the struggle. And so the very least we can do is say, okay, I'm gonna sob for a couple of days, but after that sobbing, I am back in the struggle, because there are generations coming after us who will look to what did we do to move the pendulum a little bit, or the arrow, or whatever, the marker, a little bit forward. And that is all that I feel that I can do, is to be committed that those who fought for my rights and never saw those rights themselves, they deserve for me to fight for the rights for those coming after me. And if I don't see that first woman president, I know somebody down the line is going to.
That's very profound. You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about growing up in apartheid, and now, you know, kind of helping us analyze and move forward through our political struggles in this country. But how do you think the world looks at the American electoral process? And how do you think, you know, we're talking about moving forward. How is the new administration going to be viewed on the world stage?
So I was talking to, as I said, I was talking to family, friends, parishioners, and I was talking to people that I went to high school with who are all over the world. And they, I mean, without fail, the thing that was, please explain this to us, like we are 5 years old. And I'm like, well, if I could, I would probably be a millionaire or something by now. But yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of people, there is a shock in the world that that given the 4 years that we had from 2016, that we would want that to be the reality for us and for the world again. I think that that people sense that there is in the U.S. not a complete realization of the impact of U.S. elections on the rest of the world. And you know, I'm hearing disappointment from people in England, on the African continent, in Canada, that how does this happen? And I have to say that what I have been saying is, you know, and you know this from your own context, people, the U.S. is a big player, but we all know from our own contexts that actually hate is easier to sell than compassion. And that is our human frailty, that if you can point me at somebody that I can blame for what is going on in my life, that is easier for me to take than for you to say, this is impacting us all, and if we are going to get out of it, we need to change not only our own perceptions and conversations, but we are going to have to change how and who we invite to be fully at the table.
We also should acknowledge, though, there are a lot of people, and the majority clearly of Ohioans, who believe that they voted for the economy, that they voted that they go to the grocery store. There is no doubt that inflation is high. They are celebrating today. The majority of Ohioans got what they wanted at the polls yesterday. So shouldn't we also acknowledge that maybe they have felt that their voice has been silenced and that their needs were not met?
Yeah. And so now I will go into my economist mode, because my undergraduate degree is in economics. And, again, I think that the story sold was a half-truth at the best. So yes, there is inflation in the US, but it's a worldwide, global inflation, right? And if we're going to talk to people about inflation and what do we need to do to bring it down, we have to be honest with people that this inflation that we are experiencing in the US is not something that is due to whatever administration is in place. The truth is that the whole world is going through inflation, and in fact, economists around the world have said the US has actually done better than most of the world in dealing with this inflation. And so I think that for me, what it is simplistic answers are easier to digest. So if I say to you, vote for me and I'll end inflation, then I don't have to think about, but what caused inflation? How are you going to end it? What is the particular magic that you have that will end it for me? Because people are, as you say, rightly concerned about the impact of the economy on their own lives. And it's a both and we have political leaders who, on both sides, have been unwilling to unpack the honesty of the reality of how we have got to where we are and how this is a global phenomenon and is going to need a global response for it to improve for us here and people around the world.
So what do you say to people who are feeling, from both sides, who are feeling divided, who are saying, if they prevailed last night, who are saying, well, we got what we wanted because we suppressed the evil that was coming from, from the other side, or who are saying, I can't believe I'm back in this administration again. People are angry at each other. There is a lot of division. There's a lot of resentment. There's some finger pointing from both sides. You're to blame for the problems, and now we have to clean it up. I mean, how do we take that step toward normalizing relations with our neighbors now that we realize how different people view the world and view who's responsible for the problems that we have?
Whew.
Figure that out.
I mean, if I figure that out, I want you all to nominate me for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, for real, for real. And I think that what I would say is, going back to what I said in my introduction, is, and it was something that my community, the community I came out of in South Africa, my parents, our church community, all were very clear about the dangers of dehumanization, right? And that how easy it is, in fact, to dehumanize one another. And the people who I hold as role models, as heroes for me, are people who clearly have refused to dehumanize even those who dehumanize them. And so I count myself so fortunate in having been able to spend time with people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who has every reason to hate China and what it has done to his people, and yet refuses to do that. That he refuses to allow that that dehumanization that he is experiencing to be what he gives back, right? And I think that that if you look at those who have had the greatest impact on healing countries and divisions, it has been those who have refused to play the game of dehumanization. We can talk about Martin Luther King Jr. in this country. We can talk about Nelson Mandela in South Africa. We can talk about Mairead Maguire and Betty Williams in Northern Ireland. That all of those people, the one thing that they have in common is that they have refused to question the humanity of those who oppose them. And so for me, the work is, are we willing to do the work of refusing to dehumanize any human being, even those who dehumanize us? And that takes courage, it takes faith, it takes a true sense of hope, not optimism, hope, and a fundamental joy in who you are and where you are, even when where you are seems horrific.
You know, one of my favorite quotes, Mother Teresa, near the end of her life, a young reporter was talking to her and said, you know, you've worked in Calcutta, you've worked to fight poverty and suffering, and you haven't ended poverty, you haven't ended suffering, you haven't changed the world. And Mother Teresa said, I don't do these things to change the world, I do these things so the world won't change me.
Exactly.
So how much of this is personal responsibility, personal perspective, and taking on those, you know, maybe in just our own neighborhood, taking on a view that it will get better.
Yeah, I think Mother Teresa was absolutely correct and profound in that statement that that truly the divisiveness and enmity wins when we take it on ourselves and live our lives as though those who oppose us for whatever reason are less human than we are. And for, you know, for me, I remember my father used to always say at rallies and in services in South Africa in the 70s and 80s that we need everyone to join the winning side, and that without doubt, the winning side is going to be the side that is for justice and liberation for all people. And that it might seem hard to see that truth when you are bang slap in the middle of, in the case of apartheid, an oppressive system, or in our case here after the election in a time of great division. But that is the truth about the moral arc of the universe, right? That it does indeed bend to justice, and that we have a role, each of us, to play in what do we choose to be in the world? Do we choose to be those who continue the practice of division, enmity, and hatred, or do we choose, and sometimes it is a choice that we have to make minute by minute, hour by hour, individual interaction by individual interaction, to choose to be those who believe that all of humanity deserves better, and to be the ones working towards that truth.
We do want to remind people at home that who are watching our live stream that you can send questions in, and if you're in the audience and you have a question, you can join Doug back there in the back of the room. We already have people who want to talk to you. Just very quickly before we start the questions, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your optimism range right now?
So I am not an optimist. I mean, I am definitely not an optimist, but I am somebody who lives with hope and faith. And so on that scale of 1 to 10, I stay at 10. Because, as I said, you know, I come from a community of people, ancestors, who struggled for my liberation when they would never see it. And so I cannot be anything but 100% hopeful and full of faith that this is not the end of the story. So.
That's great. And Doug, you have a question for us?
Thank you very much, Colleen. Reverend Tutu, thank you very much to you as well for joining us. Great conversation, very fitting for today. As Colleen mentioned, if you're watching us on the live stream today and you have a question, please do type your question into the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible. If you're in the room here with us today, please join us here at the microphone. Great questions at CMC always have those two things in common, don't they? They take less than 30 seconds to ask. And what punctuation mark does a question end in? It ends in a question mark. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to launch us off with a question from the live stream audience from Carol Looper. Carol asks, how do you think Donald Trump won despite his fomenting hate? And I'll add something to that. Can you also speak to the role of fear in driving oppression?
Right. And so, I mean, I think I said earlier that in a real sense in our world, historically, that it has been easier to sell hate. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of effort to turn people to looking at their neighbor and seeing a threat. The real courage and hope is from those of us who recognize that hate might be a quick fix, but it is never the real fix. And so I do think that for many people, it is easier to look for somebody to blame for the difficulties we find ourselves in than to say, what is this talking about structurally? And what is my responsibility in changing this? What can I do to change this? That when somebody says, I can fix your problem tomorrow by getting rid of those people who have caused it, that seems like such an easy fix, doesn't it? And so, yes, I'm not surprised that many people chose what seemed a quick fix. But I also believe that fear is not just an outcome of oppression, but can cause people to be okay with the oppression of others. If we can make people afraid of one another and see that some others as less human than they are, then it is easy to scapegoat whatever that group is and put the blame for our problems on them, and therefore be willing to be part of those who oppress others.
Okay. Good afternoon. Reverend Tutu, thank you so much for your ministry. And it is exactly as presented healing to hear you speak. And you spoke earlier in the beginning about fear and how that was a big part of apartheid. And Ezekiel Mphahlele wrote about that kind of fear where you're a prisoner of your own fear.
Right.
Is that the kind of fear you were talking about?
Yes, that is exactly the kind of fear I'm talking about. It is a fear that stops you from even dreaming, dreaming a better world. That it is a fear that tells you that if we expand the table, I am going to lose. It is a fear that says that person, because of their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, their religion, their place of origin, is so different from me that I have nothing in common with them. And therefore, if they are treated as less than human, that is only right so that I can experience a freedom that is not a freedom from fear. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for mentioning Ezekiel Mphahlele, one of my favorite authors.
Thank you so much. Nancy Nanny asks on the live stream audience, how do you consider conditions in South Africa today?
Whew. I always tell people that South Africa is about the age of my children. And I look at South Africa and look at my children, and it all makes sense. That I look at my children, and there are days that I am just amazed at the awesome human beings that they are. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had something to do with who you are. I am so proud of you. I am just in awe of the human being that you are. And without fail, as soon as I have said that, they will do something that makes me say, what planet does that make sense on? I mean, honestly, person, who are you? And I have that exact experience with my home country, that there are so many wonderful things that South Africa has lived up to in its 30 years of democracy, that increased access to education, to increased access to housing and health care for people in our country, to even our international policy that South Africa has been in the forefront of raising the plight of the people of Palestine to the rest of the world. So that those are things that I say, oh my gosh, that is so awesome. And then I look at the fact that still in many of our rural communities that children don't have access to school books, that still in our rural communities people don't have access to running water and clean lavatories, that still in so many of our communities, violence against women is endemic. So it is, again, a both and for me in South Africa, that there is so much I am proud of and yet so much that makes me weep.
Your father was and is my hero.
Oh, thank you.
But I know that there is so much more to a family, because your mother, you, your sister, your siblings have all had incredible impact in the world. So veering away from the election for a minute, how would you describe your legacy as a family?
Woo! Can we go back to the election? Yeah, so I'm not sure if there is a family legacy. I guess what I would say is maybe the family legacy is the legacy of hope, that was what my parents instilled in us, and that is something that there are times that I have tried to let go of hope, and it sneaks back in the back door of my heart. And so I think that maybe our family legacy is the legacy of believing that our world can and will be better, and that every little thing that any human being does to make this world better, they do for every other human being on the planet, those living now and those yet to be born. So a legacy of hope. I also realize that we are very different people in so many ways, and I think that might also be the legacy of my parents, that they were very clear with us growing up that they did not expect us to be carbon copies of them, or even to be the same as our siblings, that they truly believed in the way that African culture teaches that each person born is born with a particular gift, and that we need to family placement. Is it back? Nope.
Here, this one is.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Oh, but I was enjoying yelling. I think that, again, part of that legacy is to let everybody know that you don't have to be like anybody else. All you have to be is the best you. And that is what the world needs, the best you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad you didn't let that microphone stop you for a second, Reverend Tutu. We have just a few minutes left. We'll try to get to 3 more questions. I'll start with one final one from the live stream audience. Nevin Bansal asks, as business leaders, how should we effectively lead our teams and the community with so much division and differing value systems?
Y'all don't ask easy questions, do you? I mean, really? So I think that, again, it is a matter of modeling. That as a community leader, as a business leader, as a faith leader, that our role is to model what it looks like to live in a diverse community, and to be unafraid of different voices. And that doesn't mean that we need to sugarcoat and accept when people are peddling hate. No, that's not what that means. What it does mean is that we have to be willing and able to be challenged, to be questioned, and to not take that as a diminishment of our humanity. And that if we stand in the recognition of our humanity and dignity, that then we can model for those around us how it is okay to have different views and opinions, but it is not okay to dehumanize other people in our differing opinions and perspectives.
Bruce Smith, Episcopal Diocese of Southern Ohio, and welcome.
Thank you.
I met your dad in the 1970s when he was a visiting bishop in the Diocese of Newark. My question is, who do you see as prophetic voices in this country who can speak and will speak the truth to power in the coming years?
And I am so amazed at the number of prophetic voices that we have. I just came back from a faith leaders delegation to Palestine, and I was I was the second oldest person in the delegation by a long way. You know, I was double the age of most of the people in that delegation. And listening to those young people talk about their role in the world, in their communities, the work that they are prepared to do, the hope that they hold on to, the willingness to speak out and to work for a different world, just lifted my spirits and let me know that the young people are okay people, and that and I have found that too when I have spoken to groups on college campuses and youth ministry groups around the country and around the world, that young people are increasingly recognizing that we have to talk to one another and hold on to dreams that are about a better world for us all and not just for my little clique, and that they are willing to do the work for that to actually happen. So we don't have a dearth, what is that? Is that an English word? Of prophetic voices. If anything, we are blessed with an abundance right now.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left for a final question.
Okay.
My name is Maureen Needham. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Reverend. I had the privilege to meet your father, the Archbishop at the University of Kansas as a student. It was a privilege. So I'm asking, what would you tell somebody like me coming from Africa? I thought I found a safe haven over here in the US for democracy. Knowing in Africa, you know about Rwanda and Burundi, Eritrea and Ethiopia,
and Sudan,
South
and
Africa,
Congo.
Soweto, the burning, the killing. Are we going to, do you have a fear like I do that would the US become like that, where a tyrant is putting people against each other? I feel like it's the same rhetoric that I'm hearing here.
And I don't have, again, I think that all of these questions are connected. And so I don't have that fear because I am exposed to people who are working for a better life for all. And so I always, as I said, to me, the key thing is for us to remember that this is not the end of the story. It has never been the end of the story. It has never been, and here I'm going into my faith leader posture, that this has never been God's plan for our world. And for me, the truth is that we as human beings constantly mess up. And we constantly work inch by inch to improve. And so I cannot lie and say that I am not disappointed with this election. There's no way I can lie and say that. But I can also say without a shadow of a doubt that I am not afraid. I think that this is a call to us for a stronger witness, stronger actions, stronger caring, stronger compassion, stronger humanity.
Please join me. My mic is out, but please join me in thanking, it's on now, thanking Reverend Tutu. Very good. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. I hope you found today's conversation as helpful as I did. In some ways, the real challenge is the months ahead, but also the real opportunity. And so I got some tools for the job today. I hope you did as well. We are so grateful to those who made today possible, you by attending, everyone attending via live stream. Of course, our strong partner, CMC strong partner in Otterbein University, thank you for making this possible. The Health Institute of Ohio, appreciate your support. And of course, our host, the Ellis. We're grateful to our presenting sponsor of the live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And a very special appreciation to today's speakers, Reverend Tutu and Colleen Marshall. Thank you so much. Give them a applause. All right, we'll keep the conversations going. Please join us again next week. We'll be here again for unpacking the 2024 Columbus Foundation's benchmarking report, which starts right here at the Ellis next week and continues on November 20th, so it's two-week series. We'll take stock of our city by unpacking the results from the Columbus's first all-new benchmarking study since 2019 with a fantastic panel. Thank you again. We could not do this without you. Have a good and safe afternoon.